All right, this one's personal and twisted. A devoted father brutally killed in his own bedroom, and the people who claim to love him most, they ended up on trial. If you're into true crime stories where trust is shattered and nothing is what it seems, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, please hit subscribe, tap that like button, and drop a comment, because I want to know if you think justice was really served. Also, each subscribe helps the channel grow so that we can bring more stories to you. Welcome to Case Closed. Today, we're unraveling the murder of Jason Corbett, and trust me, this case will leave you stunned.
Oh my God, yes. The Jason Corbett case it's absolutely wild. And I think our listeners are going to be shocked by some of the details we're going to cover today. You know what I mean? This isn't just your typical murder case.
I'm actually, super curious about this one. From what I've heard, there's a baseball bat involved, an ex-FBI agent, and some really bizarre claims of self-defense. Is that right?
Spot on, Anna. This case has everything. An Irish businessman, his American wife, and her father who, was actually a former FBI agent. And the crime scene. Well, it was brutal. Really, really brutal. The whole thing just completely shattered two families across two continents.
I can't wait to get into all the details. What shocked you the most about this case?
The level of violence, honestly. And also the conflicting stories that emerged afterward. There were claims about self-defense that they just didn't match the physical evidence at all. The truth behind what happened that night in North Carolina is going to blow your mind. Before we continue, please remember to subscribe. Thanks. So Jason Corbett was this 39-year-old Irish businessman from Limerick, Ireland. He worked for a company called MPS North Carolina, which is like a packaging company. Really successful guy, you know? But his life was marked by, and I hate to say it, just absolute tragedy before the murder even happened.
Oh, what kind of tragedy are we talking about?
Well, his first wife, Margaret, she died in 2006 from an asthma attack. It was sudden and left Jason as a single father with two really young children, Jack and Sarah. They were just babies, practically. And that's actually how Molly Martens entered the picture.
Wait, so how did he meet Molly? Was she from Ireland too?
No, Molly was American. She actually moved to Ireland to work as an au pair for Jason's children after his first wife died. She had, zero experience with childcare, but somehow got the job anyway. And what started as an employer-employee relationship eventually turned romantic. And they got married in 2011.
Interesting. So they met because she was taking care of his kids? And then he decided to move his whole family to North Carolina?
Exactly. After they got married, Jason agreed to relocate the family to North Carolina where Molly was from. He got a transfer with his company, and they settled in this really nice brick home in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Davidson County. The kids were, I think, around 8 and 10 by this point.
Did the children get along with Molly? I mean, she was their nanny first, right? That's a pretty big transition.
From what we know, the relationship was complicated. Molly desperately wanted to adopt the children, but Jason always refused. He was, extremely protective of them, especially after losing their mom. And this became a huge source of tension in their marriage. Really huge.
So this was a blended family that maybe wasn't blending so well?
You could definitely say that. And there were some warning signs. In retrospect, Jason was thousands of miles from his support network in Ireland, in this new country, becoming increasingly isolated. And Molly's parents, especially her father Thomas, were very, very involved in their lives. They lived nearby and were constantly around. It was just not a healthy situation, looking back. So let's talk about the night it all went down. It was August 2nd, 2015. Just a regular Sunday night, right? Jason and Molly were at home with the kids, and Thomas Martens, Molly's dad, was visiting and staying over. And sometime around 3 a.m., things just went completely off the rails.
3 a.m., everyone was asleep.
Yeah, that's what makes this so disturbing. According to what Thomas Martens told police, he was woken up by noises coming from upstairs, right? And he grabbed this baseball bat, which, I should mention, he brought with him as a gift for Jack, but never actually gave it to him, and went up to check things out. And he claimed that when he entered the master bedroom, he saw Jason choking Molly, and that he had to intervene to save his daughter's life.
Oh my God.
But here's where it gets really, really gruesome. The autopsy showed that Jason was hit at least 10 times in the head. 10 times with both the aluminum baseball bat and a concrete paving brick from their garden. His skull was just completely shattered. There was blood everywhere. On the walls, the bed, the floor. The medical examiner said it was like one of the most brutal beatings they'd ever seen.
That's horrific. Was he asleep when they attacked him?
That's actually what the prosecution argued. The evidence suggested Jason was likely asleep or had just woken up when the attack began. He was found wearing only his boxer shorts. And get this, there were no defensive wounds on his arms or hands. None, which you'd absolutely expect to see if someone was trying to fight off an attack, you know what I mean?
So both Molly and her father were involved in the attack?
Yes, all the evidence points to that. Both of their DNA was on the bat and the brick, and when first responders arrived, they found something really disturbing. Molly and Thomas were completely clean, like spotless, no blood spatter on them at all, despite this incredibly bloody crime scene. The prosecution later showed that they had taken time to clean up before calling 911.
Wait, they cleaned up before calling for help?
Exactly. And the 911 call itself was really strange. Thomas called at 3:02 a.m. and said, "My daughter's husband, my son-in-law, got in a fight with my daughter. I intervened and I think he's in bad shape. We need help." But when the operator asked if they could do CPR, they both refused. Even though they're both trained in CPR, Thomas as an FBI agent and Molly as a former swimming instructor.
That's so suspicious.
Completely. And when investigators processed the scene, things just didn't add up with their self-defense claim. The blood spatter evidence, the positioning of the body, the lack of injuries on either Molly or Thomas. It all suggested that Jason was attacked while vulnerable, possibly even when he was already down. It wasn't self-defense. It was, and I hate to say it, it was an execution. So now we need to talk about about the people who actually did this, right? Molly Martens and her father, Thomas. Their relationship is actually really key to understanding this whole case.
Tell me more about Molly first. How did she even meet Jason?
Well, so Molly was originally hired as the nanny for Jason's kids after his first wife died. And, they eventually started dating and got married in 2011. But here's the thing. By all accounts, Molly was, absolutely obsessed with Jason's children. She would constantly post photos of them on social media, calling them her children, even though she had no legal right to them. And several family members later testified that she seemed more interested in the kids than in her actual relationship with Jason.
That's really strange behavior.
Totally. And her father, Thomas, was, extremely protective of her. He was a former FBI agent with 31 years of experience, which is pretty significant when you think about what happened. Friends of the family said he never really approved of Jason and was always kinda suspicious of him, even though by all accounts Jason was a good father, and there was no evidence he was ever abusive.
So, what do you think was the motive? Was it about the children?
That's exactly what prosecutors believed. See, Jason had apparently been talking about moving back to Ireland with the kids, and according to some family members, he'd mentioned concerns about Molly's mental health and behavior around the children. So the theory is that Molly and Thomas were terrified she would lose access to the children if Jason took them back to Ireland.
Did Molly have any legal rights to the kids?
No, that's the crucial point. She had never formally adopted Jack and Sarah, so if anything happened to Jason, custody would naturally go to his family in Ireland, not to her. And investigators found something really disturbing. Molly had actually contacted a lawyer about adoption just days before the murder.
Oh wow, that's incredibly suspicious timing.
Right? And there's more. There was a $600,000 life insurance policy on Jason that named Molly as the beneficiary. But perhaps most chilling is that after they killed Jason, one of the first things Molly did was call her family, not 911, and told them, "Dad has saved my life. Jason tried to kill me."
That sounds so rehearsed.
Completely. And then, And then there's Thomas's FBI background, which, prosecutors suggested gave him knowledge of how to handle crime scenes and how to make this look like self-defense. The whole thing feels like it was planned, or at least that they seized an opportunity when it presented itself. The way they coordinated their stories, cleaned up before calling 911. It's just chilling.
So, what happened with the trial? Did their self-defense claim hold up in court?
Well, so the trial took place in July 2017, and it was like absolutely fascinating to watch unfold. The prosecution's case was incredibly strong. They had these blood spatter experts who testified that the evidence at the scene just didn't match up with Molly and Thomas's story at all. Like, not even close.
What specifically didn't match up?
So, they found that Jason had actually been hit mostly from behind and when he was already down on the ground. The medical examiner found that he had been hit at least 12 times, including after he was already unconscious or possibly even dead. And, there was blood spatter on the underside of Thomas's boxers, which suggested he was standing over Jason while striking him, not defending himself like he claimed.
That's really damning evidence.
Totally. And get this, Molly and Thomas didn't have any significant injuries. Like, if this was really this violent struggle for survival that they described, you'd expect to see some defensive wounds, right? But they had barely a scratch between them. And another really crucial thing, Jason's blood-stained pajama bottoms had been moved, which suggested staging of the scene.
Did they testify in their own defense?
Yeah, they both did, which is actually pretty unusual in murder trials. Thomas stuck to his story that he walked in on Jason choking Molly and had to intervene to save her life. But the jury clearly didn't buy it. After just 3 hours of deliberation, which is, like, incredibly fast for a murder case, they found both Molly and Thomas guilty of second-degree murder.
Only 3 hours? That's incredibly quick.
Right? The evidence must have been really compelling. Both of them were sentenced to 20 to 25 years in prison, which is a substantial sentence. The judge called it a brutal killing and said there was no justification for it. And during the sentencing, Jason's family gave these heartbreaking victim impact statements about the devastation this caused, especially for his children who, had now lost both parents.
Did either of them show any remorse during the trial?
That's the thing. Observers said they seemed pretty emotionless throughout most of it. Molly cried at some points. But many people felt it seemed, well, performative? Like the prosecution actually pointed out that she seemed more concerned about her own fate than about the fact that a man was dead and 2 children had been orphaned.
So, what happened after the conviction? Did they just accept the 20 to 25-year sentences?
Oh no, not at all. They immediately appealed the conviction. And this is where things get really interesting. In February 2020, the North Carolina Court of Appeals actually overturned their convictions. They ruled that the judge had excluded some evidence that should have been allowed at trial, including statements from Jason's children to social workers, and some testimony about Jason's alleged history of anger issues.
Wait, so they just let them go free?
Well, not exactly. The state Supreme Court reviewed the case, and in March 2021, they ordered a retrial. So Molly and Thomas were released on bond while awaiting the new trial. And then, in a really shocking turn of events, in November 2021, they both accepted a plea deal for voluntary manslaughter instead of going through another full trial.
What kind of sentences did they get with the plea deal?
So they each got sentences of about 7 years, including time already served. Thomas, who was in his early 70s by this point, was released almost immediately because of his age and time served. And Molly was released in 2023 after serving about 5.5 years total. It's really controversial. Many people feel they basically got away with murder.
And what about Jason's children? What happened to them?
That's actually the one silver lining in this whole tragic story. After the murder, Jason's sister Tracy and her husband David fought for custody of Jack and Sarah. They won and took the children back to Ireland to raise them. They've been, incredibly protective of the kids and have tried to give them as normal a life as possible after all this trauma.
Have the kids had any contact with Molly since?
No, from everything I've read, they haven't. And Tracy has been really vocal about the impact this has had on the children, especially since the plea deal. She said that the reduced sentences feel like a slap in the face to Jason's memory and to the kids who've lost their father. It's heartbreaking all around.
God, this case is just so devastating on so many levels. I mean, 2 children losing both parents in such traumatic circumstances, and then the legal system seemingly letting them down with those reduced sentences.
Yeah, it's really, really tragic. And, what makes it even worse is that those kids had already experienced the loss of their biological mother. And then to have their father taken from them in such a violent way by someone who was supposed to care for them. I can't even imagine what they've been through.
Do you think justice was really served here?
Honestly, no. I think the plea deal was way too lenient considering the brutality of the crime. I mean, the autopsy showed Jason was hit at least 10 times in the head while he was likely asleep or incapacitated. That's not self-defense, that's overkill, right? And the blood evidence just didn't match their story at all.
I wonder how the kids are coping now back in Ireland. At least they're with family who truly love them.
Absolutely. By all accounts, Tracy and David had provided a stable, loving home. And the Irish community really rallied around them too. But, those children will carry this trauma forever. The one positive is that they're away from the spotlight now and have a chance to rebuild their lives without constant reminders of the case.
Well, this has been another absolutely heartbreaking episode of Case Closed. Thanks to everyone for listening.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed this episode, well, enjoyed might be the wrong word for such a tragic case, but if you found it informative, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Next week, we're diving into another mysterious disappearance, which is like one of the most baffling missing persons cases of the past 20 years.
Oh, that's going to be fascinating. Until then, stay safe, everyone.